Hey there. On this episode of the Intellectual Lifestyle Podcast, we talk about fashion, art, design, industry. We jump around a little bit, just a little bit about every topic. Thank you for listening. Enjoy.
It's just like working with the magic right now. It's like honestly, I love it because like the organization like is like key. And it's funny because like as I'm like sitting here with you, you got your laptop, I got my laptop. It's like, oh, like this is I could see this like work kind of like station, like space that we're in right now where we're able to just like sit down, I do my thing, you do your thing. Like we have writing notes for organizing, like we just balance out. Cause you were speaking about that flow situation that your homegirl you said was into. I want you to like name that thing again. It was kind of like a said she has a process called like play out.
So it's just so she's working with a mentor who's trying to help her kind of harness more of her positive energy. And so she's this mantra that she's been mentioning is ease, joy, and flow. And I'm trying to incorporate it into what I'm doing because I can be a little stressful at times. And so it's nice to have something that kind of recenters you. It's like, just like any other little mantra, something simple that you can say again and again. And then you're like, okay, I have a somatic response to it that makes me feel better with that. I'm like, "Okay, like, I can handle this situation. It's fine." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. And it's like pretty much like optimization, like kind of like workflow, like space time continuum kind of talk, right? But like no, I like it. I was yeah, like I seen Ray Rubin is like in his one of his posts, like I love Ray Rubin just as like a thinker and an intellect. I consider him an intellect. He has this thing where he's like by coding. Yeah, so it's pretty much like you just throw on headphones just clock in and just like go with the flow, go with the music, like. And I always have this like mantra, like when I'm creating art, to like throw everything on the canvas and then just chip away like a sculpture, like Leonardo da Vinci kind of thing. And that's what I think like vibing is anyway. You just kind of like go in and just like free flow, like all thought just channeled into like whatever medium it is. And then like you go to sleep and you wake up, you're like, what did I do? Like, oh, I just completed a little bit of everything that I did, because you got to give yourself like the leeway too of like making mistakes, and because that's where happy accidents come from, is like just consolidating and things like that. So that's like super, super dope. I love that. Shout out to your friend. Yeah, and welcome back to the Intellectual Podcast, episode 2. How are you feeling today?
I am good. I'm excited to share some of the things that we've been marinating on the last couple weeks, since the last episode. And, yeah, whenever, you wanna jump in, I know we have to do our meditation to begin with, but I really love because I think that that's kind of setting the tone to where we wanted listeners to really feel relaxed and, just ready to just kinda take in a bunch of interesting information and hopefully, create some dialogues, after they listen to our show.
100%. So let's do that now. Let's just take a little moment of silence, get a deep breath in. Yeah, here we go. I love that. I love that. Fresh energy. First, I know you wanted to dive into like fashion. We were kind of talking about it on our, kind of thing, just on our personal talks and such. And it's so dope because it's like we're almost like matching the day. The listeners aren't really know this, but like we're kind of matching just like obscurely, like browns and like reds. Today I got on red socks, you have on red boots, which is so dope. I love it. I'm gonna have to like post a picture. But I love this whole idea of like fashion and like layering and like thrifting and like keeping everything like sustainable and like, just being comfortable like in your own weight, and it's funny, we're just talking about like kind of like buy coding. It's kind of funny because it's like you can buy a dress or you just like throw on anything and then you just kind of like walk out the house and then you look back and you're like, oh my God, and like this is actually like I feel good. Not just I look good, but I feel good. Like what are your takes like on that? Like what is your kind of process about if I choose like fashion brands and like dressing and all that good stuff?
Well, I grew up wearing a lot of black, and part of what I'm trying to do currently is incorporate a little bit more color, but do it in a more intentional way to where, color in design obviously really affects mood. So, red is seen, for example, like a color of power, or if you go to a restaurant, it also, kind of increases appetite. So there's different like just responses that as humans we have to color. So when I decide to pick a color, which I tend to gravitate towards a lot of like reds and burgundies, blues, like more like a forest green. I'm not a pastel per se kind of girl, but I've been trying to incorporate a little bit more pastel because again, like I want to be able to access the mood that's associated with that color. So, for example, today I'm wearing a silk shirt that is, I would say, more of like a wine color. And then a top because I ended up watching the most recent season of Bridgerton. I was kind of going for a little bit of those vibes, something a little bit flowy, like the hugs, the bosom area, and then but feels like organic and fun. And then I have black leggings, then these like little red, kind of like snakeskin vibe cowboy boots that are just like ankle boots. Just so get playing with textures is really fun for me color, but it has to be, I think there definitely obviously needs to be intentionality, but more so it's just an expression of like where I'm at with my mood, the textures that feel most comfortable to me. And I've really tried to incorporate as much of an organic element as I can. So whether it's silks, cotton, cashmere, linen, just have some component of that in what I'm wearing because like, it's almost like it just makes you feel like more at ease, more at home in yourself.
Yeah. Fully understand that. Like, it is so dope that you say that because it's like that's where it is. It's like that warmth. Like you can put on something and it has like a scent or like a smell or just a feel, and it's from somewhere, And like I love like the top because it's like okay, you got the snake skin, so it's like the sharing like the ear of the snake kind of vibe, and just that warmth of like the clothing because it's very intentional. Like where these pieces and these fabrics like come from, where they're going, and even the color choice. Like I realized that like early in my life, like when I was started designing clothes, I designed these hoodies and they were cotton based, and for some reason I chose pastels. When I ended up, you said like pastels, but when I got the hoodies, like I don't know what it was, but I could literally feel the vibrance of the colors, the yellows, the pinks, and the blues. Like they were very just like vibrant, like almost like euphoric in a way. So that's when I realized like, oh, like, this intention in like choosing pieces and colors, like can really bring out like a person or in a superpower in a way if they choose that, like, and I know we gravitate towards things, I feel like sometimes like there are pieces of clothing that are just simply made for us, like out there, which is why I love couture. I love thrifting because you can find one thing that may have been years ago, 20 years, 10 years, and it was made with the intention and some way it finds its way towards you. And you're like, oh, like, yeah, this is for me. And you give it a life. He did multiple lives of like, generations. I just came from the mall and I was on talking to my friend Prosper at Denim Tears. They have a pop up there, and we were we were talking in retail because there was a mother there shopping with, I want to assume, her son. And we were already talking about clothes and like color choices and things like that. We were like, yo, man, it's like so many people want to go towards all black instead of just like mixing it, And then somebody came in and they just wanted like this black pair of jeans, which I have no, thing towards black. I have in black pants right now, but it's like his mom like singing something else that was like red and like white, and she was like, "Oh, you should probably try that." And it's like, no, I'm gonna go to the jeans, but it kind of makes me think about like where does our choice come from, and like where does it build when we're shopping, and where does it come from? Because I like to think of like I remember being like what like 16, no, actually even earlier than this, like 12, and just wonder how I would dress. When I got older, I'm like, yo, when I get 16, I'll probably be the coolest like teenager, more like khakis and white tees and like sneakers. And I'm like, wow, where does this like style come from? And like what you start to figure out is like, oh, it blends from like your mother's side to them dressing you, like your father's side. Then you just kind of become the blend, depending on what you were like raised upon and, having different roots and such, because I'm a city boy, but I was raised in the country as well too. So, I like the rugged, I like things that can be useful, and have a long lifespan. I love like getting shoes dirty and wearing boots and wearing hats and gloves and utility, but I also like, a clean shirt, a good fitted, something that's good and that fit towards me, to where it feels like, oh, this is who I am now. Like towards the inner child, like, oh, you will wonder who you're gonna be. Oh, this is who you're gonna be. And I just love that aspect because fashion can bring that in a sense. Like, like, yeah, I don't, do you feel like that? Have you had that experience?
I think it's really interesting that you bring up like, your parents kind of informing your fashion choices. Because when I think about it, like growing up, My mom, she was always like she doesn't do casual very well. Like she's kind of been learning in her older age, to work with that. But when she was younger, she would always dress up for work. And my mom always looked elegant. And I love that about her. Like she just had these like beautiful blouses and like the pencil skirts and really cool heels because, we're from Bolivia. And so she was able to get really nice leather shoes for my grandparents who would come back and they would bring us things. But also my mom grew up having the ability to have her clothes tailored. And that's the other thing that I wanted to mention that you can take something that's from a thrift store. And if you have the vision and you're willing to be a little bit creative as far as how you style it, as long as you get it tailored, you can look like it's so much more expensive. That's something I think that people forget. And that's why I'm also trying to focus on natural fabrics because one, they tend to last longer. I don't know if many people know this, but there was a big difference in how clothes were made from the 90s to 2000s to where fast fashion really became a thing. Even if you feel clothes made in the 90s, the fabric itself feels heavier. It's a heavier knit. It's a stronger knit. So it withstands, washing and drying and all that. The other thing that I personally do is I don't use a dryer if I can avoid it. I hang dry a lot of my clothes. So I mean, some of the clothes I've had since I was in high school, fake like, I can still fit into them. But having my mom as a inspiration, and then also my dad, like back in the day in the 70s, he actually wore like the shoes with a little bit of lib. Do you know what I mean? For me, so exactly. So like some of my dad's old stuff, actually, when I was younger, like my parents would get rid of their like older clothing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm keeping this because one, my mom has excellent taste and she had a lot of really cool pieces, especially for coats. I love her coats. But my dad too had his own sense of style, and like it's funny. And I'm gonna throw this back to you because I'm curious as far as your, growing up, like who you felt was more of an influence on you, or whether maybe it wasn't your parents, maybe it was your grandparents. Because my grandmother, for example, she came from very modest means, worked incredibly hard. And, her day to day also, she was super casual, but like when she dressed up, she looked so glamorous. And that was something that like I don't have per se I'm not a glam girl. I'm more like I'm very much like, California girl where it's like I'll look cute, but like I don't go to the nth degree unless I have to. But for me, it's less about being glamorous and more like a style being a signifier, right? Like, what do I want to communicate with what I'm dressing, right? How do I, because I mean, growing up, like for me, because I was so into certain musical subcultures, I wanted to attract other people who were like me. So I knew that to be able to do that, the way I dressed would either bring people to me or push people away. So it was really a way of kind of navigating that space and understanding, okay, who do I want to come into my world, because they have a light interest and who, it's kind of gatekeepy where it was like, okay, well, I don't want to hang out with cheerleaders. So I'm not going to dress like a cheerleader, right? I'm going to dress like a punk goth, industrial girl. But as I got older, I realized, it's nice to put on almost like, different costumes, like clothing to me. That's why when people, ask me questions about style, I enjoy it, but also I want them to learn their own voice because it's really like, how do you want to be seen by the world, And you can have so much fun with it, which I think is like really interesting. And plus, it could be commentaries. It could be a social commentary, it could be a political commentary. It can, to your point earlier, it can influence mood. You can either make people feel more comfortable or you can antagonize them. Like there's so many ways to play with the way you dress that like, it runs the spectrum of how it's going to be interpreted. So let me go back to the question as far as how do you feel, like who in your family influenced you the most as far as your fashion?
It's so funny that you asked that question because like it's funny. It's like a yin and a yang. Like everybody has this energy within them that's masculine and that's feminine. That's just by nature, by science, right? So, I remember like, you know, having times where I would be with my dad and we just spend so much money at the mall, like on shoes, like specifically shoes. I guess that may be a male thing. I mean, it's also a woman's thing too, but like tennis shoes, spent so much money on just like tennis shoes, like Force Ones and things like that, and like sweatsuits, like activewear. And it's funny because I love that, like being older. I think that's like a thing, like as you mature, like you want to be like fully more comfortable. So you want to wear more sportsy, more lounge, kind of cozy, and have a good pair of sneakers on to be able to just kind of be versatile and have a longevity in where it is where you're going, but you can also be stylish, because I'm like a 90s, 2000s babe. So, like from like Sean John era. It's like back on. I mean, like I had so many Puma sweatsuits, like all colors, and it's funny enough that you asked that because that's where I derived my fashion inspiration from now. So I create a lot of sweatsuits and tracksuits and things like that. And I still love tennis shoes. I'm not heavy on buying tennis shoes because I'm not just one of those guys. Because again, I like to be versatile and I like to get my stuff dirty. Now I will buy, a couple of shoes every now and then, but they have to really just mean something to me, because I look at them as art as well too, because like they have a lineage and, funny enough, like, things that were made before aren't necessarily made the same now. They have cheaper, fabrics and leathers and things now. So you got to kind of watch where you spend your money, or it kind of just goes down the bin if it's not a good sneaker or boot. But on the other end, you talked about like, high fashion and kind of like that luxury kind of warmth. I get that from my mother, like oh my God, I've been in the closet, Moschino coats. Oh my God, DKNY stuff, like stuff that you probably never see again. And like, I seen her the other day and I was telling her about her coat that she had posted. I was like, yo, that coat, because I remember that coat. And then she was like, yeah, I get so many compliments. I'm like, yeah, mom, do you realize like that style is coming back, like the archive fashion and like people bringing those things out because they have like a fur neck around it. And it's like, oh my God, it's like a plaid fur, something that like the designer would really have to like be in a space to think about, and it evolved from something. I mean, just the baddest coat ever. And I love stuff like that, like trenches and get downs and boots. So like that's kind of where my tasteful curation comes from, as far as that, from like more high luxury to designer things like that. And I love it. I love spending money on that because like those are the things that like can still to this day be like made like very sustainably, very ethically, and very durably. And you can still find for like either cheap or just like a bargain if you just know how to, bartering and trade, buy it, sell and stuff like that, which is why I love consignment shops, and things like that. And I wanted to kind of talk back on the topic where you were saying like, like your family wasn't as well off, but your culture and your heritage, kind of like still was displayed through clothing, because like that's a handy topic that I think is like in history is very rich, because it's like no matter where you are in your life, I think the representation of like expression can be your clothing. It can be like a tee or a shirt or a garment that is like knitted from like a family member that has more value than like $100 like designer piece that just is in the mall. Like I come from a heritage of like knitters and quilters and things like that. So like, you can be a baby and have like a hat knitted for you, and then like it's given to you, you keep it forever. Those things are very valuable. And that's the thing like in history that I've noticed, even when I look at like pictures and archives, that I've seen like family members and like even like from, African immigrants to Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, they always had a nice suit, and they may have not had $100 to their name, but they always had a nice suit. And I love that like rhetoric, because it's like Andy almost, or it can just represent like your heritage and your culture. I love like the 20s, that swinging kind of era, the 50s, the jazz clubs, like where people had their loafers and like the ladies had on their little doodads and all that stuff. And everybody was well dressed regardless of the economic, pressure that they were in. And a lot of those things were, taken to the cleaners, like you said, like you don't use a dryer. I love that, because even if you look on tags, the dryer can, essentially embalm your garments. And I'm so bad at that. Like I have a few, I got this jacket that I'm wearing, dry cleaned at one moment, and it's just a better way to take care of your stuff, take care of the fabrics. It gives it life, it gives it a spirit, it gives it that. And then you pass it on, and that goes into where you choosing like where you're buying from, so you're not buying from a Shein or just a brand that's just like super fast fashion, and the chemicals are like leaking into your skin. Just kind of mess with your endocrine system, because that was another topic that I wanted to talk on. It's like the cosmetic and the fashion industry, because I feel like they're kind of synonymous, as far as and where they bridge and where they sell, as far as products, as far as like overconsumption and things like that. I don't know if you had anything to like piggyback off of
Uh,
fashion.
yes and no, because I mean, yes, definitely as far as like obviously natural fabrics and how they interact with your body. But one thing I wanted to bring up that I think kind of sort of intersects with what you're sharing is So I don't know if everybody knows that seersucker was actually a affordable and lightweight cotton textile in India back in the day. And in the late 19th and earliest 20th century, especially in the South, it became popular. And, when I talk to people, I don't know if they realize the origins of some of the fabrics that were created were more of a working person's fabric. And then depending on who decided to take it on and adopt it in a certain manner, it became something that was like more like, higher level, people of a different social class, would have the means of purchasing it. So in the 1920s, it was actually used quite a bit in New Orleans and became very popular in the South due to a clothier by the name of Joseph Haspel, because he had recognized the potential for the comfort of wearing it in the heat of the southern summers, which I'm sure the people who live here in Atlanta fully understand, like, why that would be beneficial. Brooks Brothers actually popularized it in the 1920s and 1930s. So it came, it was a very common man's or common woman's kind of fabric, and then became something that was elevated. And once it's elevated, the price point obviously changed. So, something that was sustainable and affordable, became the opposite. And that's something that I think we should discuss, because even in cosmetics, you know what I mean? There are a lot of natural formulations that, people can even make their own cosmetics. I've learned how to play around with certain things when I was younger, as far as like making my own blush, making my own eyeshadow. But not everybody, has the curiosity to do that. But ideally, whatever you put on your face, you should be able to consume. And that's something that I think that now in this age, people are resonating with that more, because whether it's like, what I mean, clothing that you're putting on your body or cosmetics that you're putting on your face, you want to make sure that you're not disrupting your endocrine system, like you were saying. It's sustainable from the whole aspect of the initial product being created to you using it and then even disposing of it. Because that's the product life cycle that I think, especially within the fashion and cosmetic industry, is a big deal. We think of fast fashion. Why is fast fashion a problem? Because it ends up in landfills. It ends up, not just in landfills, that it ends up like in the ocean. Like, sadly enough, you see those pictures like of all the trash that, washes up on the shores of different countries, the beautiful beaches that are marred by like all the discards that other countries especially just, put out into the world. And the US is a huge part of that. So that's why I wanted to also highlight, okay, where if depending on where the clothing is made, there are people, whether it's like India or China, there's already the burden of all the chemicals, all the things that go into making the fabric, and then having it shipped here, and then having people use it one or two times and then get rid of it. And then essentially like the trash coming back to other places, and people who had nothing to do with that having to deal with the repercussions of like that product life cycle. That's something that I think, especially thrifting is really important. I mean, growing up, my mom did have, when she lived in Bolivia, they did have money. And so they did have access to like a lot of very nice tailored clothes. We get clothes imported from Europe. But then when we moved, here, we had to be much more frugal. So that's one reason why, like growing up, my parents were kind of like the people where like they dictated what I wore. If I wanted them to buy me clothes, they had to approve it. So one of the reasons I started thrifting was because I was like, if I want to have my own style, which my parents don't approve of, then I have to get it myself. That meant, I was in high school, I worked at Pizza Hut. So obviously, and this was in the 90s, I did not make very much money. So I had to be very judicious about what I wore. But back in the day, you used to be able to find Gucci, you know what I mean? Like in a thrift store, like really nice Chanel. Like you should actually, especially in the area that I grew up in, used to be able to find that. So it's a lot harder to do now. But the other thing I was going to mention that I wanted to just jump into really quickly before you talk about cosmetics is having things repaired, right? Like a lot of people are so used to like, okay, something ripped, well then I'm just gonna get rid of it. And there's a lot of really cool initiatives that are, being either have already been started or are being initiated recently. Levi's is one that just happened that I think is definitely worth noting, to where it's called the Wear Longer Project, and it's in partnership with Discovery Education. And Levi's is basically teaching high schoolers how to sew on buttons, patches, to patch holes, like hem garments, and refresh pieces that they, may already own. Or even if they see something cool, they're like, oh, like, maybe I can get this for less because it has a hole or whatever. Because I mean, I know when I go to thrift stores, I look for any sort of like, little ding on there because sometimes I mean, not just, I would say Goodwill as much as like the little mom and pop ones. Because sometimes when you go to the counter and you're like, hey, this is kind of damaged. Are you still willing to sell it for a little bit more of a discount? They're like, okay. Sometimes they're like, no, it's as is. But sometimes they're like, well, yeah, I'll take a couple dollars off. So you can get, I mean, as long as you're willing to repair it, you can get supper super cheap. And one of the cool things about that is that if you're able to make little repairs, like one, it's a great side hustle, but two, you develop a greater appreciation for how the clothing evolves. Like there's different techniques where you can use like if like embroidery in a certain way. I think there's certain Japanese techniques, and I can get into that later, where you embroider and it's like it's obvious that it's a repair, but it becomes almost like part of the art of
Yeah.
what your clothing is. And so again, instead of discarding something as like, okay, well, this is broken. Yeah, you give it new life. And so, you know, hopefully, and I mean, even doing that can be a meditative experience. You develop a greater appreciation for the person who originally sewed it, right? Because, I mean, if we had to make our own fabric, and we had to sew it all, we definitely would be willing to pay a lot more because we're like, okay, this is the effort that goes into like, making a shirt. And I'm, pretty sure that most people who like are willing to buy a $3 shirt would understand weight. Like that shirt is worth a lot more than $3, because of the amount of effort. And just because someone in another country is being paid like a pittance to make it, doesn't make it any less valuable because again, it's the labor that goes into it. So I think that really understanding that process, one, I think that Levi's project is really cool because one, it's taking kids who are in a position to where like they're really learning about like how the world works. And if you teach them, okay, this is the level of effort that's required to keep this going. This is the level of effort you probably meant to actually even create it. As they grow up, they'll definitely shop differently. They'll be more sustainable from the get-go because again, they'll get a better understanding about product lifestyle, lifestyle. Yeah. Exactly. And that'll incorporate that into their lifestyle as far as their choices, not just with fashion, but with other things too. And I think that's really important because the more people are educated as to the why and the how, the more likely they are to gravitate towards something ideally that is going to be more sustainable, not just for them, but in the collective.
Totally. And that goes like in every, thank you for that. Like that's such a immersed, like you're like a fashion guru or like with that, like thank you. Cause you're sticking on everything that actually matters in that sense of like, especially in that industry. And it's funny because it boils off into other industries as well too. Food, the cosmetics, every single thing. Like it's just the intention, about it in improving this life cycle. Cause we spoke on that the last episode where like, they have the Japanese have like a broken glass or a broken ceramic and they basically take the process and just redo it. It's a tedious process. Like they, pretty much start from like a simple clay, simple materials and just build and build and build and like shine it, polish and what it does is like it gives people the patience to like enjoy something, give it a new life, and it's something like totally new, brand new in that sense. And like I think that experience alone is like it's the gift that keeps on giving, and that, I have friends that do with the salvage denim and they repatch, and little five boys, they repatch the jeans and they put these like blue stitches or like light blue denim and like you see it and it's just like, oh, like this is a pair of jeans like that have a whole new light that had like, story to it and you give it a whole nother like chapter and it's like, this is actually a brand new pair of jeans, after this design. And I love that because like those are what like the fashion industries are looking at and they're starting to reproduce that stuff. They get inspired by that and they do it and they mass produce it. But the main thing is like keeping that life cycle like very sacred, to where like nothing is leaking, and if it's a garment that's defective, you don't just throw it in a landfill. You give it another life. You take the fabric and you make something else, or you put it on display, as something. You archive that piece, because that's what archiving is. Archiving is like, hey, this may have not worked or like this is that, but somebody will appreciate this because there's a process behind this. And I love that. I love seeing the behind the scenes. I love seeing factories. I always like watch how it's made on TV because of that, just because like that life cycle is so dope. And Virgil Abloh, the designer, before he passed, rest in peace, he spoke on that. He said like the next step in fashion is going to be sustainability and like reusing that life cycle and able to like garner more success, in like the yield of like what it is that we're doing, whether it's a fashion house or whether it's just a thrifting brand, like we can control that. Like we can actually, like, clothes can't just get up and walk, like we can control the life cycle of it, just make sure everybody has a yield that's very like professional, because you want to be, you want to have a story, you want to be fresh, you want to be fly, you want to represent, but you also have to know that, hey, this, it comes at a price, and that price can be expensive or it can be very inexpensive depending on who you are and your place in that. So I just appreciate you speaking on that, because I'm very adamant about it. It's a hill battle, like uphill and downhill kind of battle, like that I'm doing even with my designing and how I approach, and I'm looking towards more like independent designers, people that actually can sew and like knit and things like that, to be able to bring them to a space to bring beautiful ideas together. So I'm always just soaking up inspiration and to kind of like sickle over into like, I wanted to talk like in the cosmetic industry, because I love what you said, that like people can make their own products at home, the shea butters and their oils and all these little different things that they use on the daily. And the beautiful thing about that is that you can garner everything towards a personal, thing, because this is another beautiful thing, right? It's magic, but it's so simple. The fact that we are all different, we all have different blood types, we all have different body types, we all have different diets that attribute to our culture and our lineage. So what you start to come into, you can actually use to just like, what's the word, prolongate your longevity in your life, in your own life cycle, from aging to wrinkles to health to all these different things and powders and such. I seen this process where the Egyptians, they made this kind of like black eye mask tar out of like ashes, like long ago, and it's like such a tedious process, but like, oh, that's where that came from. It came from a natural ash or interval, and those are something that it has no pathogens, so it's nothing that can pretty much like disrupt you. And what I realized in the cosmetic industry, especially in women's cosmetic industry, is that there are so many different, products and product types that are essentially cancer causing agents. And, from deodorants to mascara and makeups and, all soaps and all these different things that can disrupt your endocrine system, your pH balances and such. And what I realized the other day, I've kind of been tinkering on it for like some time now, but I'm like, yo, like, I think that's the next chapter. And I kind of want to dive into that, like cosmetics, as far as like creating healthy cosmetics and such like that, to be able to like attribute backwards and to be able to help people just like, okay, look amazingly beautiful, but at a cost that doesn't take away from your actual life cycle. You know what I mean? Like creating something sustainable. I love Fenty. And seeing like what Rihanna has done, like with her brand, and I'm just, I don't dive too much in it, because I don't spend money on makeup and such like that, because I like my things, but, I know people like to look good. I know it's commercialized. I know it's advertised towards, women being as gorgeous as they could be and, playing dress and playing makeup. And I love that, being in the fashion industry and the model industry and being in art. But I just want to make sure that like the next thing is like the health cycle behind that. So like we aren't having, women develop breast cancer and like different types of like lymph node cancer and stage 3 cancers and such like that, because like those products that were made, it's only like a little bit of what people use like day to day, but that day to day trickle builds on and it regenerates your DNA, and that's what alters like the whole cycle of like you developing a cancer and things happening like that. So I seen that, and I want to like really speak on that, because I'm like, that's an idea of mine that I would love to like dive into. On LinkedIn, I follow this amazing lady. I want to say her name is Danya. She's in STEM and here in Atlanta, Georgia, and she launches like STEM programs for like young girls, young black girls, and like STEM and doing things in STEM, from hair care and hair oils and like that, teaching them the science behind this stuff, so they can essentially create their own brands, like, and sustainable brands, because that's what matters the most. It's a science down to the beauty of it. Oh my God, I just had it crazy. It's funny. There's a show coming out on FX. I think it's called Beautifier or something like that. I don't know if you've seen the commercials, but it's basically about, it's like a kind of whimsical kind of show. It looks like, I forget who directed it, but it's some heavy like actors in it. And it's about like this shot that people are taking to become like the most beautiful they could be. And it looks so like crazy and whimsical because it's like action packed, but it's also just like trauma filled. And I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna have to probably dive into this because it speaks upon that. Because we are in the age of that. We're in the age of AI. We're in the age of like BBLs or plastic surgery, which I think is awesome. Well, not everything, but the science behind like plastic surgeons and stuff like that. Because people are doing it. You go to Korea, people are getting lifts and they're doing things to just keep their skin like organized and such like that, where they feel like somebody else has a profession in that, doctors and nurses and such. So I think that show's gonna be interesting. So you guys out there listening, you should check that out on FX. It's coming out soon. A little free primo. Yeah, yeah, maybe we can talk about that show after we like come back and watch that. But yeah, that's one of those things that I'm realizing like is the science of like the daily routine. I think if we can healthily like spark like the science and like the beauty in the things, then we can build upon something that can last and like generally like prolong our life cycle, so we aren't having these because it's a cycle, people are getting cancers that they don't have health insurance and they can't do this and they wondering wow, like what's going on. It's because years of deodorant use, years of hair wash, years of all these things that are kind of taken away from your natural body cycle. And I mean, even today, we have like cures for diabetes. Now we have cures for cancers now that I'm saying. We have all these different cures now, stem cell research, which I think is genius. So it's like we have the tools to be able to like prolong our life cycle and our beauty and to kind of make it right. It says to wrap that up in a nutshell. Like how do you feel about that? Have you considered some of that? Have we talked about that?
So I wanted to
Red rolls.
So one thing I wanted to kind of touch base, like going back to like the whole plastic surgery thing. No shade to anyone who gets plastic surgery or gets fillers or any of that. I haven't done any of that, but in 10 years I may decide to get a deep plane facelift. Who knows? But one of the things I really appreciated about learning about, for example, French beauty or just other cultures and the way they approach beauty is really it's how you take care of your skin. Like if your canvas is not a good canvas because you're not treating it well, then yeah, you're going to have to use a lot more products to kind of hide that. And that's one reason why I really advocate for people kind of figuring out like how to, deal with their skin. I've had very problematic skin, because of hormonal imbalances and having PCOS. So for me, I can't use any own product. I have to be particular. Most of the time, I actually don't wear any foundation, any makeup at all. Um, the one thing I really enjoy is kind of playing around with different oils like turmeric oil, pumpkin oil, and noticing the difference. If you just mix a couple or more than a couple, a few oils together in the sequence that you use them in, it can really like plump up your face, make you look like you just went to the spa and it's something simple. So just in case anybody is curious about like how to make your own makeup, there's a really great website called wellnessmama.com. And you can literally learn how to make liquid foundation, highlighter, so many different things that will like allow you to have more agency and kind of see, okay, because sometimes when you get makeup, you know what I mean, you can have allergic reactions and you won't know what's going to work with my skin. But if you make your own formulations, you can literally control like how your body responds. And the other thing too is, I mean, that people have to consider is when you make your own makeup, like it's not going to be able to last forever. You know what I mean? It's going to have a finite time because it's not supposed to be shelf stable for 2 years. It's something that you make, you either have to refrigerate or, you keep it in a place where it's going to, have the most stable conditions. So that way you can use it for a certain amount of time, but, you can't keep it forever. So that's the other part too. When we think about makeup, part of the reason why it has all those chemicals is to make sure that if it's being shipped and exposed to hot temperatures, it stays consistent. It's same thing with our food. Part of the reasons we have all these things are, the preservatives are to keep it while it's being, created, distributed, stored, and then consumed. So, that's why like, having expiration dates. I mean, technically you can eat a lot of food well past the expiration date, especially if it's a dry good. But people are scared because they're like, no, no, no. It's, that's why they'll say best by the state. But if you go, for example, on that Wellness Mama site and you're like, okay, I want to make my own foundation, you're going to be using really, cool natural things like shea butter, argan oil, aloe vera gel, witch hazel, and you can actually use cinnamon and cocoa to change the tone of the makeup and the color. So that way, you know what I mean, you can use it as bronzer. And obviously, if you're using these things, like, you can consume most of them. And so you're putting stuff on your face that ideally you won't have a crazy allergic reaction that's actually going to help you look like you're using all these expensive creams, but you're using stuff that's natural. So I think it's really cool. And I encourage people to get creative. You know what I mean? Get creative with how they're choosing to interact with their body and the world around them. Whether it's, and oh, just really quickly to also tie in the techniques that we were referring to as far as the Japanese techniques. So the mending is actually shishiko and boro. Those are shishiko is a form of decorative reinforcement stitching, and boro refers to the actual patched garments. So usually a white cotton thread is used to create the geometric or running stitches on, whether it's like a pair of jeans. And then the purpose really was to make the clothing more durable, to make it longer lasting, but it ended up becoming like more of a functional art. So you were taking something that was meant kind of like the same thing with like the kintsugi, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing this. That's the Japanese technique from the 15th century for repairing broken ceramics, where instead of like hiding the cracks, the broken pieces are rejoined using like a certain kind of lacquer mixed with like either gold, silver, or platinum. And so the repaired item is actually considered more beautiful and more valuable than the original because it's embracing its flaws rather than like saying, okay, this is broken, let's get rid of it. And so I think that, in that context, like those kinds of things like represent a certain level of like resilience and embracing imperfections that I think is really beautiful. And I'm hoping that, as people move through um life, they can learn to like embrace their own imperfections, whether it's in the clothing, whether it's, in the way they look. Because I mean, again, no shade to plastic surgery, but I think sometimes there's such a push to be perfect. Like you talked about Korea. One of the things that I've been reading about is, how people kind of have to um, really focus on the pretty privileged part where like unless you look a certain way, like even, the kind of jobs that you're able to get, you know what I mean? Like it really affects the perception of your family and their status. And like when it gets to that point, I think it can be kind of toxic. So, I mean, I welcome anyone to help educate me and help make sure that I have a more well-rounded perception of this. And I've been doing the work to look this up, but I keep seeing a lot of increasingly like um just more intense responses to like to the beauty industry where like you have to look perfect all the time. And I mean, I dated a French dude for a while, and he was telling me how, style was really important because if you didn't look good, people wouldn't want to play with you. And like this is like little kids on the playground where like if you don't dress well, people will want to play with you. Like to me, that's such a weird concept. I'm like, what? Like that's I don't know. There's a part of me that doesn't strike me as right. But again, I have to be a cultural relativist where I'm like, okay, just because I think something and it makes me feel a certain way doesn't mean that's necessarily wrong. It's just a different perception. So I'm trying to keep that in mind, but I think it would be better even like when we're talking about like nervous systems and how people regulate that. If you feel comfortable, if you feel at ease with the way that you're moving in the world and the way that, you are kind of centered, no matter what kind of blows around you or people's opinions of you, you're like, you know what? I'm good in my shoes. Like, I feel great about me as a person. Then your nervous system is going to respond and you're not going to get phased by things as much. So I think that being natural, I think obviously growing up in California, it's weird. There's like a dichotomy because, you have like the granola girl. It's like, I don't wear makeup, I look beautiful. And I used to have gorgeous, gorgeous friends, honestly, like little hippie girls that like would not wear a shred of makeup and they looked like they were just like photo shoot ready.
Wow.
Oh, and me with my horrible acne would be like, I wish I could be like them, but I wasn't. You know what I mean? Like I would use my little gothy makeup and I would do weird designs and whatnot because I was trying to deflect from the fact that like I had really bad cystic acne. And then I had friends who just were like, you know what, I'm gonna embrace the whole makeup thing. And they were like, I want to do a 60s mod aesthetic and I want to have like crazy like eyelashes and I want to do my hair a certain way. And like for them, it was more again about their expression. It was the artifice. It was, going all out and being super glam and like really doing up their like their foundation and like especially, in I would say the 80s or the 90s, like some of the makeup like wasn't always the most splattering because like the 80s had a lot of like sparkly pastels that on, I would say an older face, like it definitely looked heavier. And that's one thing that's been really cool. Like as the cosmetic industry has evolved, different formulations have allowed the people, from a wide variety of age ranges and backgrounds to play more with makeup. And the other thing too, I wanted to mention going back to cosmetics is I really like, and that like Rihanna's brand as well, is that she has offered a lot more range as far as coverage of actual shades, right? So one thing for me growing up that was a little bit challenging is because I have more like a yellow-based undertone. I couldn't find shades that would work with me because a lot of people or a lot of companies were only providing ones with pink face. As pink base, it was for like I would say more of a Caucasian skin tone. So one of the cool things is as sustainability has been pushed more, so has like inclusivity. And that means that a lot more people can feel like, okay, like this makeup was actually made for people like me. You know what I mean? And that's the other part about even making your own makeup that you can control. If you make your own makeup, you can control the shades, right?
Yeah.
So you can make something as dark as you need to, as light as you need to. You have that agency. You have that control over what is going on your face and how it looks. So I think, I mean, especially again, it's such a like cool creative process to be able to do that. And instead of relying on companies to come up with something that's going to work for you, you're like, no, just like, if you're a little chef in the kitchen, you're like, okay, I'm going to make something delicious. You're going to be like, I'm going to make something beautiful because I want to feel beautiful. And like, if you take ownership over that, like, I think that can be really empowering and really beautiful.
That is, yeah, but I mean, like totally, because it's so funny you say that because like I forgot about especially like that's why it's so good to hear like a woman's perspective. I forgot about like the inclusion like at one point like especially in the fashion industry was like literally like cut off for certain things in that sense. So like I mean in my mind I'm thinking like oh that's the entry point for like building. It's like making sure like things are inclusive towards like every shade of like person and like every skin type, body type, like all of that. I was looking at this lady's her outfit outside. It was like some skins. I asked her where it's from because I love the fabric. And yeah, I was like, yo, this is dope. Oh, another thing, I remember Kodak at one point, the foot film that is used for Kodak it wasn't created to like capture darker skin at one point. So that was like a cool, like interesting fact that I had learned it. I think that changed it like since then, but like that's just to go to show like the inclusion and like building and like technological like innovation and things like that. Like making sure things are like more innovative and inclusive down the line. I just think that's like so freaking amazing. So yeah, that's so rad. Like I don't know, that's wholesome to me. That's wholesome to me. I love the female perspective. This is why I love having these conversations about like fashion and everything in that sense. Speaking on that, since we're kind of talking about fashion, did you catch any like good outfits of the grannies? Because it was a lot of like oh matter of fact, so we're talking about like skin and oh my gosh, sure. Is it shirt or is it shirt? I always say shirt. I don't know if it's shirt or shirt. Oh my god. She's like 80, I think 80 years old. Her skin is flawless. But I'm like, she has to know something like from her heritage, to still be able to look that good at that age. And her outfit was amazing. It's like, yeah.
So I think there was some really interesting outfits, and we'll definitely have to do a part two because I know we wanted to try to do it as well, but like it's gonna be on the next episode. But as far as the Grammys, I think it was really interesting because, I mean, for me, like, I get why some people want to show a lot of skin, but personally, I like it when people just don't necessarily do that and they just get creative with like just the actual style or like the tailoring. I think tailoring for me is really big because you can take a very simple garment and just with a little bit of like, little tuck here, a little tuck there, or even like clothing that is not meant it's kind of like there's I guess a style that's more of like a man-hating style where it's not about like catering to the male gaze and being pretty. It's more like, okay, how can I be subversive or how can I communicate, different themes through my clothing. And I think that's really cool. So as far as like my favorites, I mean, there was definitely a lot of outfits I really liked. Were like men and women. But one of the ones that I thought was cool was Grupo Frontera. They were in, I think, Campillo. and they had kind of a Western vibe to what they were wearing. But I thought it was cute. It was like, kind of on trend, definitely accessible for people. FKA Twigs was in Paolo Carzana. I thought that was really cool too because like her outfit was like very kind of ethereal, like sort of like
Oh yeah,
very like, and it was
the best.
she was definitely sheer, but I think it was done in a tasteful way. I obviously liked Bad Bunny's a suit. I think that was Schiaparelli. I think I was mispronouncing it. I apologize. Um, Billie Eilish in Hoda Copa. Like I thought again, it was less about like being like especially beautiful and more like, okay, what am I communicating with
Yeah,
my
yeah,
out?
my personal style as well too. That's one thing like Billie Eilish is great at, and all those artists. I see you have like very like tasteful, like ethnic kind of cultural Latin pigs. So that's to be expected. Because I just found out your family has lineage from Bolivia, so that's amazing to know. So yeah, that's so freaking dope. Yeah, I just love it. I love when people showcase things and just try different things, especially like the ethereal stuff. So I'm just like keeping an eye out for that. Yeah, it's amazing. I love the Grammys. Everybody so well dressed. Music was amazing. Music was on point, and I think that's where we'll kind of pick up like on the next episode. Just like music and sustainability and music and kind of like politics and music and art curation and things of that nature. Because it's just amazing to talk about. Music is such a powerful tool and things like that. Also, we can kind of piggyback later too, like on the guilds, like the artist guilds and things like that. Because I definitely wanted to get into that because we talked about that on our phone call, which I want to, just have so many shout outs, when it comes to that. So I'm gonna have my list of like shout outs there for that. Yeah, I mean, it gets nothing better than this conversation right here. This is everything from I'm walking away inspired and influenced. Just shout out to every brand. One brand I am gonna send you is Caperni. They do very scientific like builds and like materials and such like that. They made a bag out of like NASA foam at one point. It's literally like a whole new space substance. And like I feel like, that brand like represents like fashion moving ahead. Cause like we gotta start thinking outer spacesuits and space materials, foreign objects. If a meteor came here with foreign objects, what would we make out of that? And like what would it be? Very like just royal kind of things and blacksmithing and all that kind of like couture. I don't know. I love that kind of stuff. And the main place you see that is in movies. You see a lot of that in movies. So shout out to all the set designers that are out there working tirelessly on costumes and all of that good stuff and making dreams come to life. Because it's not an easy task, but it's a very rewarding task if you can do it right.
Agreed. And I mean, I know we also wanted to touch on sustainability in music and kind of tying into the fashion aspect. I mean, one of the things that I really appreciate, I'm glad that you did the shout outs because people who work in creative direction and they have to oftentimes make really beautiful things with a very limited budget and they have to get creative and they have to be sustainable. They have to like kind of have the dream of, okay, or the vision of this looks like nothing to someone else. But if I put these different elements together, what can I make? And it's really cool to see how innovative people can be. And, you'll see set designers where like there's nothing and then there'll be all these cool builds. And there's actually a lot of events that are happening around the Atlanta area that people are trying to take advantage of that and trying to promote, creativity and engagement. There's an event, I believe it's happening this weekend. And that's the other thing too I was going to mention. If anybody's interested in finding out events that are happening out in Atlanta, I do have a little group that I curate, and essentially it's a repository of different events. And I could definitely post a link on the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. Like, be more inclusive to like the events that's going on because I think people love that. Either like a newsletter, because I have Mailchimp and they're based here in Atlanta. As a matter of fact, when I did the Atlanta Design Festival, they're in the same building, like literally. So I think that'd be dope to like select emails out. So yeah, we could have our listeners, sign up on emails. We send them events, and the thing is that we're doing it just kind of keep you guys tapped in. Like that'd be rad. That'd be rad.
Yeah, because I definitely want to, certainly promote as many local events as possible, but also kind of inspire people. Like if they see something cool that's happening in Atlanta, well then, maybe you could create a counterpart in your city because if you don't support the cool things, they cease to exist, but you need to get the community behind it. So sometimes it's just being inspired by what people are doing in other cities and just the possibility of certain things happening. So I think we should end with that, just reminding people like, I know it's a chaotic world right now, but just consider the possibility. Like, really just reaffirm your vision, your creativity, because that can nourish you in ways that you really don't expect. And it can amplify the things that you really want to build on that feed your soul, feed your spirit. And I think it's really essential in these times to have those things. So, I mean, creativity, most of all, I think is something that we should, really try to reach within and try to amplify as much as possible.
100%. I dig that. And on that note, we can take a deep breath. Her in the Intellectual Lifestyle Podcast, episode 2. Thank you very, very much. And we'll see you next time. Yeah.